Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mining Now. We are here at CIM Connect 2024. I am your host, Gus Miner, and I'm looking forward to this interview, mostly because, selfishly for me, it's the first time that I do a part two. Pretty exciting with a part two. We'll be able to catch up with DRA Global to find out what's been going on over the past 12 months in their journeys. So we have Pierre Julien here with the president of Americas for DRA Global, and Vikram Jayaraman.
You got that right.
Nailed it. That it's joining us again. And hey, on that note, it's been a year since we last seen each other at CIM last year in Montreal. There was a lot of conversation about the buzz and the energy that was being broadcasted as a whole for the critical minerals and the things that we need to deliver to the world, and how you're impacting a lot of the clients that are looking to put those critical minerals into reality in their segment. What have we learned in the past 12 months, and what are you guys up to?
Yeah, maybe I can just start quickly on the critical minerals front. Yeah, that's continued to be quite active and quite important to DRA Global, although some activity in the lithium space, for example, has fallen off a little bit globally. The prices come down. So, but what's actually happening in Canada, because of the significant investments being made in the EV space and in the battery space, if we look at the investments announced in the last 18 months and even up to about 3-4 weeks ago with Honda, we have over $50 billion of battery plant, EV plant, cathode plants. Honda alone, has announced that they are going to invest $15 billion into Ontario and make Ontario their global hub for EV. So that is driving the continued need to develop the lithium mining side in Canada, in specifically Ontario and Quebec. So we're still seeing quite a bit of activity on the lithium side. With that piece, a few other updates. Vikram, I don't know if you want to mention some of the advancements we've made, both globally and maybe how we've moved into not just doing studies in engineering, but constructing, building our first mine in Arizona.
That's right. Yeah. No, thanks, Pierre. I appreciate the segue to that. Before we jump in and talk about the project we're busy building in Arizona, there's a couple things I do want to add to that. So in reference to critical minerals, if you think about it, right, the push for energy sovereignty and critical mineral sovereignty, specifically from a North American context, I suspect will continue for the next foreseeable future. And you see a significant amount of government push with respect to funding, specifically our neighbors to the south. With the Department of Energy, LPO funding, you see a significant amount of money being invested into critical minerals. And that would obviously find its way to the allies of the United States, which Canada definitely is a part. And Canadian critical mineral strategy is definitely supporting that. So even though in the grand scheme of things that lithium pricing doesn't necessarily support several projects potentially going into execution, from a North American context, I suspect we will continue to find a bullish market for critical minerals, specifically on the lithium side. In addition to lithium, we've also been, gotten ourselves into rare earths in Quebec for a company called Torngat Metals that's actually developing one of the largest rare earth deposits in northern Quebec. So that's a thing that's changed over the last 12 months. And that obviously finds its way into the project that we're talking about, which is a copper moly project in Arizona called Mineral Park, which when we spoke the last time, it was in a feasibility/engineering stage, and now we are in active construction as we speak, and it's a pretty cool way of putting that mine together. It's a truly an integrated team where you don't have a client's team and you don't have a contractor, you don't have an EPCM. It's all basically built into as one integrated team that's got the same set of KPIs for safety, making sure the project is actually built under budget, under schedule, and keeping the focus on productivity. And there's no, everybody basically reports into one project manager, regardless of whether you're the client personnel or the contractor personnel. So it's an interesting model that seems to be working. So by the time we have part 3, hopefully with you, we'll probably have the end solution to how the construction actually went ahead. So
let's talk about our Heavy Industry World Tour, brought to you by Savona Equipment, supplying mining equipment worldwide. And Corporate Traveler Canada, helping companies travel the globe simpler, faster, easier. We are heading to events across North America and Australia and filming episodes on location. Email us at info@crownsman.com to be part of Crownsman's Heavy Industry World Tour. The mining industry is navigating a significant transformation driven by electrification, critical mineral dependency, and net zero targets. But balancing daily operations and capital projects can be overwhelming. Burns & McDonnell is your trusted EPC partner, supporting projects from concept to completion. With more than 125 years of experience, they stand ready to help the mining industry meet the demands of the energy transition. Visit burnsmcd.com to learn more. Did you know cementitious binders can be responsible for up to 70% of the total GHG footprint of mine backfilling processes? Now you can replace up to 50% of the binder in your mine backfill operations with Graybond, Graymont's new low-carbon cementitious binder. This lime-based alternative binder maintains a 40 to 70% lower GHG footprint compared to typical cement and can adapt to varying mine conditions without compromising performance. Learn more about Graybond at graybond.com.
In addition to that, we've now have improved the amount of advisory services we do in the market. So last time when we spoke, we talked about all the optimization work we're doing on the process engineering, putting all the clevers. We've now segued into more advisory services, which is very much in making sure our project's operationally ready. That's in planning. So we do a lot of operations readiness. We're presently doing that for Frontier Lithium in Ontario. In addition to doing a feasibility on that for the mine and the concentrator, we're busy with the operations readiness for AngloGold Ashanti in the United States. And the big aspect to that is also looking at the ESG readiness of projects, because they have a major impact on what you need to design. And design obviously has a turn-in effect on permitting and environmental impact. But that was a long-winded answer to the question you were asking, but I'll turn back to Pierre and see if I missed anything that you'd like to add, Pierre.
Yeah, nothing. Those are certainly the key points, and we've continued to. I think we talked a lot about. I recall in our last interview, I think you asked me how was the engineering business going, and I answered with, "I wouldn't know. We're not in the engineering business. We do engineering, and we do great engineering, but we're in the business of helping our clients build that business case. And part of that building that business case is in our industry, there's been a lot of focus. 80% of the focus in feasibility stage is CapEx. How much is this mine going to cost? CapEx, reduce the CapEx. But when we see project failures, of which we see too many of them in the industry, we see that the focus on CapEx, although it's important, takes away from focusing on what the mine is going to cost to operate and how quickly it will come up to speed. So if a mine does not come up to nameplate capacity within that 2 or 3 months or 4 months, whatever it was in the study, we see capital destruction, we see economic destruction, and to the extent where if you're a single mine company or couple mine company, it can take your company down,
it can make or break you for sure.
Yeah, and we've seen that in I won't name project names, but we've seen that recently in Northern Ontario, where a project failed to come to nameplate capacity, doesn't then generate the cash required to repay the debts that are on it, and that'll sink the company, which actually brings you to another point, which Vikram will probably talk about, is your finance structure and how that's structured to align with the risks associated with your startup and your commodity prices and whatnot. So, yeah, a lot of our focus on the business case of mining has been to, yes, let's get the CapEx right, but let's not forget about that we need to bring this mine into production on time, on schedule, but not just the construction part, getting the metal units out the door.
I mean, that's got to be such a critical part, right? It's like, yes, we built it cheap, now we can't operate it, right? It's going to fall apart if we touch it, right? So, I mean, I imagine that would have a significant impact on life of mine as a whole, right? Sure. So you never get a chance to even recover your investment. And one of the things that I picked up on what you were talking about just now was, the ability to give the end-to-end solution to your clients. And I would imagine that by eliminating all of that red tape that you're taking on their behalf, right, to consolidate all these services and to consolidate everything into one cohesive model of delivery, it must have a significant impact on cost alone just from the elimination of that red tape between moving parts. Am I on track here about that? Or?
I think you certainly are on track. I mean, maybe it's less so from a cost perspective, but what it does certainly do is from an efficiency and effectiveness and how you're able to look at the project from a holistic context, right? So I'll give you a simple example. Typically, when a company like ours would engage in a feasibility study, the mandate would be relatively simple. Say, folks, this is the portion of your scope. Don't worry about what the other guys and girls are doing. Just focus on your portion of the scope and make sure that you're going to focus on getting that CapEx to a particular number. That's what it is. So it's really a study being done for the sake of being able to get approval to take it to your bank for the purposes of financing. It's not necessarily a study being done for the purpose of setting it up for execution. What we do is essentially help our clients to take a step back and say, folks, it doesn't have to be parceled out to 15 different people, each with their own set of views on how their portion of the scope needs to come together. There's a bigger picture here, and that bigger picture involves that we need to plan for not the process plant and the mine, which we need to do regardless. We need to keep our eyes on the capex, but at the same time we need to keep our eyes on, do we have the right kind of operations readiness built into it? So I'll give you a simple example, right? How many people is it going to take to run this mine? When do we need to bring them on board? What kind of systems, processes, procedures, workflows do we need to have in place? What kind of tools and equipment do we need to have in place for these folks to be able to start hitting the ground on the day when we turn the keys over to the operating team? Mm-hmm. Are they all well trained? Where is that labor force going to come from? How does it align with the IBAs of the impact benefit agreements that you may have with your local communities? Have you taken into account all the labor considerations? Does it have to be unionized? Does it have to be non-union? These are all the questions that actually go into an operations readiness exercise, and it has an implicit effect on your pre-production capital. As much as it is as an eye-opening window to say, oh boy, we've got so much stuff to do before we can actually get the plant turned over and producing metal. Quite frankly, that's the business case for a mine. It's not construction, it's actually producing payable on the back end on time, right? So this allows us to basically take a step back, look at it holistically and say everything is interconnected, and the focus cannot be just optimizing CapEx without really thinking about all the aspects that need to come together to truly deliver on the business case for the project. I don't know, Peter, if you want to add something.
And how turnkey, how close to turnkey can we possibly make this, right?
CIM is Canada's leading technical institute dedicated to the sustainability of our industry. Members enjoy professional growth opportunities through CIM libraries, publications, webinars, societies, and the job board. Experience the CIM community firsthand at the Conference of Metallurgists, August 19th to 22nd, ICARD, September 16th to 20th, and the CIM Health and Safety Conference, October 6th to 8th. Visit CIM.org for more information and join CIM today. Building Energy explores the dynamic world of energy and technology. From traditional oil and gas pipelines to cutting-edge renewable energy projects, we cover it all. Become a featured guest and share your insights on industry trends, environmental and efficiency strategies, and the latest technologies transforming the energy landscape. It's your time to be the voice of energy. Reserve your spot today. Email us at info@crownsman.com or visit crownsman.com.
I mean, I've been part of it a few times, right? Where everybody's excited. It's no longer a project. We're flipping over operations. And then you're like, oh my God, we got a year's worth of work to redesign our policies, procedures, or operating practices. It's like almost starting from scratch again. And I guess that's what a big part of the eliminating of the process that you're eliminating, right? Especially with that pressure. I mean, there's got to be a whole lot of pressure with all these investments that are happening at I call it the retail level, right? So we've pre-sold this dream of having all these batteries and stuff, and we haven't. we have no feed. No, right?
Exactly. And I think one of the reasons we come at it from this perspective, and I think we talked about it last time with DRA, we're not just an engineering company that designs and builds mines, but we operate mines. We operate process plants. So we operate about 15 mineral processing plants across Europe, Middle East, Australia, and up until a year and a half ago, we were doing a few in the U.S. On the coal side. But the important part is from that experience of operating these mines, these process plants, we understand We understand what those requirements are, and we build them into our projects. So if you think about it, operating 14 process plants, that's more process plants than most mining companies are operating. But we understand the intricacies of getting the project up to nameplate capacity, and so we take it seriously, and we bring that knowledge and those skills to the table, which some of our competitors don't have that experience. They may have it. Some of their people who come from operations, but we have it as a company, and that's why we've had to develop these systems for our own business, and now we've taken those best practices in operations and lessons learned, and we apply them to the project. So we're, as Vikram says, we're taking a much more holistic view of the asset and developing that asset.
That's very cool. I mean, and without opening up and sharing your secret sauce, right? Through those lessons learned and through that transition of saying, hey, we're going to reconfigure how we do this so that we can efficiently deliver a mine as quickly as possible and also to satisfy stakeholders. Is there something that along the way that you've uncovered that you're like, wow, we never seen that was a huge issue before until you got into it, right? And because it seems to be a mystical box, right? It almost seems like a black box when you're building it at first because it seems like everything's going all right, but in this transition, what created that hole? Where did it come from? Have you seen like a really good nugget that you said, as long as we can cover that one, we're doing significantly better on their timelines and on their delivery? Again, without sharing your secret sauce on social media. Right?
No, that's a good question. And funny enough, there isn't actually, if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of secret sauce. It's basically common sense. But fun thing about common sense is not necessarily very common.
That common, yeah.
Right? But to answer your question, so two things have come about in our recent sort of exercises, specifically from an operations readiness front, since we're talking about that particular subject. We're busy with an operations readiness exercise for a gold project in Nevada. Now, two things have come through that exercise that's become very clear. There's always a feeling that resources should be relatively easy to find. It's not. Especially with large chip plants being built in southwestern USA, access to labor, not just from a construction, fabrication, installation perspective, but also, let's say, access to good quality labor that can potentially become operators, maintenance folks, reliability engineering, and so on and so forth. They have actually become quite difficult to find, right? So the timelines associated with bringing some of these resources on board has shifted significantly over the last, let's say, 18 months. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is also from a startup and commissioning perspective is that, yes, even if you had all of these access to good quality resources, the amount of time it takes to train them to a level that's would be considered appropriate and applicable to be able to hit the specific McNulty curves, as we would call it in the industry, so that you're on time, ramped up, that also has changed because mostly around the resource issue. But the most important thing that we have found through our exercise is that you need to have a core team of seasoned operators and maintenance professionals, and they have to be, and they can be, quite frankly, international, and that's a key component of what we bring to the table. We call them internally a SWAT team. What these SWAT teams will necessarily do is that you drop them in. All they've done in the last 25, 30 years is operate plants and maintain plants. Now you have a core group of, let's say, 6, 7, 10 individuals that are in there, rolled up, sleeves rolled up, working with the local teams, imparting the knowledge of the last 30 years worth of operating and maintaining processing facilities, training them hands-on, staying with the project through the startup and ramp-up. That's a missing golden nugget that unfortunately doesn't get uncovered on several projects, right? So the key, if I have to summarize, is don't underestimate the time it takes to resource your project, specifically on the O&M front. Do not underestimate the effort it takes to train them. And most definitely do not underestimate the effort it takes to bring in seasoned quality people so that they stay with your project until your ramp-up is complete. Where you make your money is your ramp-up. When your ramp-up fails, all that NPV and IRR somebody had on a piece of paper, they evaporate. I don't know, Pierre, if you want to add something.
No, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head on that one, and it's 100% true that especially mining companies that are building in a current mining jurisdiction. They will very many times say, well, we're in Nevada, we're in Arizona, we're in Sudbury, where, it's a mature mining market, should be no problem getting staff. Well, the reality is that it is a significant problem, and you have to be thinking about, you can't be thinking about this 3 months before startup when you've hired your mill super, we got to get some operations people. No, you need to be thinking about that a year ahead and laying out that plan to train the trades and the operators, because they're likely going to come from other industries. And that's where us at DRA, we bring now those operations specialists in, attach them to the hip of a new young lady or gentleman who's going to become an operator, and we have that seasoned operator work with them for 6, 8, 10 months. So yes, they're going through training on, we have all the fancy toys of doing online training and simulation, but nothing is like working in the mine.
Experiential learning.
Yeah, exactly. Being on the plant floor with that experienced operator, that's where walking, in fact, at the bottom of the plant where all the sump pumps are with that experienced operator, and you look up and he teaches you how everything is interconnected. That's where you see all the problems happen. Nothing can be better than that, but you need to plan for that. It's not going to happen unless you're thinking about it significant amount of time.
Exactly. I mean, and you see it in all industries and all companies, right? You decide all of a sudden you've got a 30% boost in your business or 40%, and you've got to onboard people. You've got a huge core of seasoned personnel, and bringing on 10, 15, 20 team members is disruptive. And then when you're looking at a mine facility that's opening up, it's like 5% experience, and you're bringing on 95%.
Exactly.
There's no doubt that that's a massive mountain to climb. And have you seen where, like you touched on it a little bit about, you think that it would be easy to build a mine in a mining town, right? But mining towns already got mining people. Like it's already been kind of accounted for. Have you seen it being a little bit better in a greenfield environment where it's a brand new mine in a brand new community that has not been exposed to mining yet, and it is now you're converting that that area of people to the mining space? Is it a little bit easier on that side of the spectrum, or does that even exist right at this point with new projects? Or
it doesn't exist. The projects we're working on are essentially in current existing mining jurisdictions, the ones that are in the execution phase. But maybe in part 3 and part 4, we'll be able to bring it. Well, we are working on a project in a beautiful jurisdiction that us mining folks never get to work in. We're in a study phase of a lithium project in France. It's
beautiful,
southern France, about 3 hours south of Paris, completely non-mining jurisdiction. So we'll be able to report back to you. Hopefully that project will carry on, move ahead, and we can let you know how it works out.
How that goes, yeah.
But at the same time, we're also advancing projects in a few other jurisdictions in Europe because of critical minerals. The focus on mining in Europe has been ramped up. So and we're involved in a few of those projects in jurisdictions that haven't seen mines in 30, 40, 50, 60 years or more. So stay tuned.
Very good. And then that almost leads to one of the questions I had with this too, as far as, we talk about ESG, right? And one of the biggest component, like one of the big components of ESG outside of environment is the governance, right? And when you're operating in all these different jurisdictions and you're working with all these different cultures and backgrounds and different groups, how much have you seen where you're able to kind of get a little bit of the best of all the worlds that you're working in to really capture a solid governance structure that kind of helps everybody succeed, and maybe to a certain extent, build like a franchisable mining circuit, if that makes sense, like kind of like the McDonald's of mining, right? Where you can operate anywhere around the world and you've got a playbook that everybody can adhere to and it's working really well. Like, are you starting to see that where it's starting to align in that direction through your career? Or?
I can tackle that, or if you want to tackle that.
Jump in and then I'll segue on the back end.
Yeah, tell me if I'm wrong.
I mean, who would have thought we would put McDonald's and mining in the same conversation, right?
I'll say I'll separate the two components. One from an engineering perspective and the use of systems, processes, tools, all of the design tools that we use, absolutely. We're getting much better at using the same processes to take a project through the technical portion. The second component is the local jurisdiction permitting processes, and also how the construction companies operate in those jurisdictions. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get to a cookie cutter or templated process on that, because every jurisdiction has a different methodology of fabricating steel, fabricating components, construction, earthworks, how those local industries have been built is different in every country. So that's
probably the legal side as well, right?
The legal side is languages are all different. So that is something that maybe with in 10 years with advanced AI and all the data we'll have had built up by that time may help us out on that front. But 10 years from now, I probably won't be here for that interview with you guys, unfortunately. So.
He'd be somewhere in the Caribbean,
I'll be on
watching the sunset and sailing away. But just to tag on to that, see, what makes mining industry unique in the sense is that although you have best practices that is considered meaningful and responsible for where we need to be, they are generally guidelines. What we typically do in a project tends to be very specific to that project, and it has to have the context of what that ore body is, where is the project located, what jurisdiction is that, have they actually had mining before, and all aspects around what are the communities close by, is there buy-in from the community. All of these elements actually go into the G portion of the ESG. Now, from an engineering side to what Pierre was saying is that we have a good understanding of how it needs to be designed, such that things such as visuals, noise, dust, vibration, those elements can be easily mitigated and taken care of. However, to generate buy-in for a particular project, to say this is meaningful for both the community, the society, and the country as a whole, that's a significant amount of effort that is very unique to every project. And that's an element that our clients and our mining companies deal with on a day-to-day basis. I don't think we're quite there yet, but the best practices serve as a good framework for us to say, if we need to be looking at this kind of a project in this kind of a jurisdiction, these are sort of the minimum that we need to be taking into account to be able to get a project into permitting. Now, what also complicates it is that from a G perspective on the ESG is that many of these new jurisdictions where these projects are being contemplated, they have different requirements, A. B, sometimes they don't necessarily fully appreciate and understand what those requirements are themselves, mostly because they're relatively new. Let me give you an example. You go, speak to the regulators in Nevada. Chances are they likely see more applications on a daily basis compared to someone like North Carolina. And on that very basis, you could say, because of the level of activity and the quantum of paperwork that Nevada sees, they probably have staff that have been seeing this day in, day out. And then you bring somebody in North Carolina as an example, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting North Carolina as in North Carolina, but just as an example. Their requirements can be quite different. So you have to be able to tweak to what they're looking for. They may be looking for stuff that would typically be produced in a feasibility level at a PFS level, mostly because it's not very clear, even for the regulators. So you're dealing with these, several layers of complexity. So I don't think we will ever get to that point of being able to say McDonald's of mining from a design as to how that bun needs to be shaped. We could probably get to that point, if that makes sense. So, going back to the analogy you made.
Right. I mean, it is interesting, right? So, and because one of the questions as far as like building a proper plan, putting that that thing in place so that you can have that seamless transition. I mean, in my side, I always envision having an organizational risk assessment or something in place that takes care of the project phase, but also very seamlessly transitions to the operations side, so that on that transition, you're not reassessing risk, reassessing planning, reassessing. Like you're not starting at that point. It started here, and it should be kind of sunsetting the chaos of the project side, but also igniting the operations side smoothly. how have you guys been approaching that planning since you're doing that end to end and you're
Jeez.
considering all that stuff?
You need to come work for us, Gus, because you're actually speaking the same language as us, and I will have to make you an offer separately. But jokes aside, but that's exactly it. So this is the ESG readiness that Pierre and I were alluding to you before. So before we jump in and say, okay, so you've asked us to look at a processing facility, Mr. or Miss Client. Okay, so we'll get to work and we start doing drawings and stuff like that, which is typically what you would expect most companies to do. We actually take 2 steps backwards and say, folks, just let's look at it from the context of what this project is. And I'll give you a perfect example. So we were dealing with a project once again in North Carolina. So that project, interestingly, had several issues, which came about through lots and lots of discussions with not just the technical team, but we were discussing with the permitting team, we were discussing with the local regulators, the local municipalities, the service providers, etc. Just to put this in context, this is a project where you have an interstate that separates a property. You had high-pressure natural gas pipelines that were transcontinental, that were running underneath the property. You had services being brought to a neighboring site through this property. So you had to sit and look at, if I were to do this design, what can it screw up from permitting, environment, neighbors, communities? If I were to do this, what can it possibly screw up, right? So all of those questions were being asked way earlier than before you get to the paper and start doing your calculations, etc. Doing a mine plan and a flow sheet and a design, quite frankly, anybody can do it. But to be able to systematically ask those questions to say, what are the restrictions do you have? What can possibly screw things up? What can we touch? What can we not touch? Is your answer confirmed? Have you spoken to your regulators? Have these elements been taken into account so that we know what we can design within the restrictions that we have for this project? That to us is what we call as an ESG readiness. It's really a bridge between the restrictions on the confines to which a consultant and the owner needs to work together with, so that we can design the project right from day one to what it needs to be, and you're able to get through permitting much more seamlessly, as opposed to building the best cookie cutter that you can. That'll get the job done, but to your point, go back and reshape and remodify because it's not going to fly through permitting. So that's an important aspect of ESG readiness exercise that we do as a part of our studies. Pierre, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, no, just reaffirm that we have, as a result of those things, companies have been bitten by not paying attention to some of those things or minimizing what their impact would be. And, if people who understand the permitting process or the mine development process, we know it goes through a PEA phase, preliminary economic assessment. That might take 5 or 6 months. Then it goes to a PFS. That might take 8 to 12 months. Then it goes to an FS. And if you have not asked those questions and you get to your FS phase, and now you're talking to your regulators and you've done something in your layout, your flow sheet, all that work you've done for 20 months, you have to go back and rethink it, redo it, redesign it, re-engineer it. That all of a sudden puts your project behind schedule because you did not ask the right questions at that PEA stage. So it's really happening pretty much once you got the exploration drills on the property and you're getting those first assays and it starts to look like something real, you need to be asking those questions of what it's going to look like. And that's a pretty major shift in how we approach developing mines. And the second piece is, Vikram alluded to earlier, is the regulators are now looking for detailed information that really typically hasn't been available until the feasibility stage, because you have to do a lot of work, development work, some engineering to get the answers on quantums of water and dust and effluents. And this is where, in order to do those things, we have to start implementing a lot more simulation. If we're not doing the work, what can we do? We can try to do as much simulation. So this is where AI, high-level simulation work, process simulation, and using those smarts, using data sets and benchmarking from other projects, so we can go to the regulators and say, listen, we can't give you a perfect answer because we haven't engineered it to this. But based on these data sets of 83 mines built like this,
right,
this mineralogy, we can tell you this is what we can expect. And we're getting there with process and simulation software and AI, that we're going to get to that point that we can now do that. And we have to, because the regulators are asking for it, and they don't necessarily understand that you need to do X amount of engineering to get there.
Yeah, and I guess they're looking for that plus or minus 10%, not the plus or minus 300%, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that happen, right?
Yeah.
It's like your footprint is larger, your processing is larger, your budget just tripled for those critical questions. And I'm sure that's the outcome that everybody wants to resolve. Is nobody wants to pay triple what they thought you had to pay or whatever the outcomes are, right? So it's very cool. So as far as your journey now and the projects that you're on. So last year we got the chance to talk about projects you were kind of starting, and then the dream was building, and now you're executing. What's it looking like for you guys from moving on from this moment that we're talking now and then into the next year or two or three?
To the point you made, we sort of touched on this. The focus for let's say this year and probably about half of next year is really delivering Mineral Park. That's the key project for us, and that to what I was discussing before is based on a very interesting contracting model, which hopefully by this time next year we can come have a separate discussion and a paper on how projects need to be built using a salt and pepper team, which an integrated team as opposed to salt and pepper. So that's obviously the key focus for us as an organization this year, is delivering on all the plans that went in during the engineering stage. Construction is ongoing. Whatever value we unlocked, putting all of the clevers into those engineering and plans, we need to now preserve it during execution and deliver it, and hand the keys over to our client. We're supporting them on the operations readiness front, etc. So that's the first part. The second part is, we can't take our foot off the gas pedal on picking up good projects that have a high probability of going into execution, have a high probability going into financing. Now, what are those kind of projects? If you typically look at in North America, they tend to be mostly copper and some precious metals, depending on who it's actually developing, and lots of, let's say, the critical mineral space, which is essentially around rare earths and cobalt and black mass reprocessing. We talked about it as a concept the last time in our last interview. However, that's actually now materializing. Maybe I should probably bet on my own speculations in the market, I guess, because there was a time when we were joking about possibly the automotive industry vertically integrating into refining and black mass reprocessing. That's actually happening as we speak. So we are starting to get into some of those projects presently. So those are the new ones that's going to be very challenging and interesting because it's not been done 100 times before. This is where it takes not just the clevers, but also be an ability position to do all of the simulation work in the back end. So that's where we use tools and systems like HSE Sim, but we also do use tools and systems like InfraWorks. It's a software system that we use, to the point I was making before, that allows us to essentially overlay Google Maps, add in the topographic data, and then take some models and start playing them on Google Maps to say, if we were to locate these facilities in this fashion, would it fly with permitting? Will it actually cause issues with the local communities, etc.? So all of that fancy stuff is going on right now on those exciting projects that we're busy working on. That's in different stages of development, PEAs and PFS and feasibility studies. So we have to keep our foot on the gas pedal with all of these interesting projects and studies without taking the focus off of executing and delivering Mineral Park. I don't know if you want to add something to that, Pierre.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our focus, is making sure we deliver. DRA has been growing significantly in the Americas, and we've arrived now at this point. Our value proposition, is we've seen the growth, so we know our value proposition is getting traction in the marketplace. And as a result, where if we look back 5 years ago, we had completed one or two decent feasibility studies in the market. We now, in the last 5 years, have completed 60 plus NI 43-101 feasibility studies. As a result, we have, a half dozen to a dozen projects that are on the verge of execution. So that's quantum step change for DRA. So that's a big part of our focus as we move into that, going from executing one project to hopefully executing 5 at once. We have to ensure that that our processes, our systems, our people are rock solid, everything's tight, and we can execute those. So that's one part of it. But we continue to grow, and I think I spoke last time about the growth we had seen in South America. That's well established. We went from 0 people to 300 offices in Lima and Chile, and now Vikram and I are back focusing on North America, and part of that growth is establishment of an office in Phoenix. In fact, my friend here, Vikram, will be relocating to Phoenix, Arizona in a few weeks to establish DRA's presence in the Southwest U.S. So, yeah, lots of things on the go. It's very exciting, and we're looking forward to telling you how it worked out a year from now. So
we have a lot of open-ended questions for part 3, which we will close the loop on next time we come and speak.
Absolutely. And on that note, I mean, as we wrap things up, I mean, I'm sure that people are watching and they're like, how do I get involved with DRA? So whether I'm a constructor or whether I'm a mine that wants to contact you, or maybe, I'm a person that just wants to be part of the team. How do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of DRA and to see how you guys can help, or how they can help you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll close the question with a very simple idea: is that I came to DRA for the very simple reason of the fact that the company is highly entrepreneurial. People roll up the sleeve, get the job done. Hierarchies, maybe on paper, don't necessarily exist culturally. That's the value we have. Everybody worked together. And everybody were accessible for me to go and approach and have a conversation. So on that basis, I could say our LinkedIns are wide open, our emails are wide open. We are the types to go sit and have conversations with students on a regular basis. We are more than happy to have people approach us, have conversations, come to our offices, engage in discussions. And we would love to have the opportunity to engage and have discussions to see if we can mutually grow.
Absolutely. We have a number of people working for us today that contacted me or Vikram on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm
here.
I'm Joanne. My hand is up. Who do I talk to? I'll set up a Teams meeting with you tomorrow, 10 minutes. We'll have a chat, and then we'll advance you through the recruitment system." But we both take an active role, so contact us on LinkedIn, and we do check it every day. And when it comes to recruitment and identifying talent, we both take that very seriously. That's been part of our growth success, is identifying and bringing on world-class talent. And we're like I say, we're focused on it. So contact us.
That's exactly it. And one thing, Gus, which I want to close this, because I'm sure you will find this interesting as a Northern Ontarian yourself. In projects like Frontier, where we're working on right now, in our contract with Frontier, we have established a scholarship fund that allows Frontier and DRA to come together, not to write a check to a student to say, here, you got a scholarship, go study, whatever. This scholarship system is actually set up where the student, whoever happens to receive that fund, will now have access to the individuals like ourselves in DRA or our client organization, with the possibility to go through apprenticeship, training, co-op, in addition to receiving financial funding in a Northern Ontario or Northern Quebec setting. So, that individual not only, has the money to go do their courses and study work, but have access to people that can be mentors, that can give them a path to an employment, that gives them the opportunity to understand what actually happens in the mining industry behind the screens, behind the closed doors in an organization like ourselves or our participating client, in this particular case, Frontier. That's the level of effort we take to create the platform for future employees of both our mining clients and DRA have access to us. So this is not a company that hires and fires people on the basis of the projects we get. We hire for the sole purpose of retaining them, holding those talents close to our heart, and developing them into future leaders.
And more importantly, what I'm hearing is that building that pipeline.
That's right.
If we don't spend time building the pipeline for the next 3, 5, 10 years, we can't be upset at ourselves 3 years from now when we have nobody to hire. Right?
Exactly.
So
100%.
I really love the model. And you heard it here. You heard it here live. LinkedIn works. I know myself, it works very well. And you're open to it. So if you're listening and you're not on LinkedIn, get your butt on LinkedIn. Get yourself in front of Vikram and Pierre, and get part of the mix. I mean, we're looking for people. Mining is looking for people. And it's very exciting. And I really do enjoy your model. I think it's going to really work really well. And at the very least, it gives a perspective for mining companies that may have constructed in the old model to kind of check it out and see, what the difference could be. What's the DRA difference, right? So I congratulate you both on all the successes you've had since we last spoke last year. I certainly look forward to next year, and hopefully we stay in touch in between as we have, and we'll go from there. And again, on behalf of the CIM, I mean, what a great show here in Vancouver, and you guys are a great part of making sure that this is a reality as well. So, thanks to DRA for being involved. And on that note, thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot. I mean, I certainly learned a lot. I mean, selfishly, I like to learn so much about all the guests that we interview and what's going on in the world. I mean, we kind of get stuck in our little bubbles, right? So it's good to kind of get out there. And if you want to get all the details like we talked about for LinkedIn and DRA Global's website, take a look at the links below, and you'll have access to the world through those contacts. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Thank
it was
you,
a
Gus.
pleasure.
Thank you, Gus.